Why silence is power. Most people believe power is loud. They believe power speaks first, explains itself, defends itself, argues until the room bends in its direction, but that belief comes from fear, not wisdom, because the truth is quieter than that. True power does not rush to be heard. It does not tremble when misunderstood. It does not chase agreement. It waits, and in that waiting, something important happens. When you do not speak, others begin to reveal themselves. When you do not react, the world shows you its shape. When you remain still, noise loses its authority. Silence is not empty. Silence is a mirror. Most people cannot endure it. They fill every gap with words because stillness makes them uncomfortable. They argue not to be right, but to be seen. They explain not to clarify, but to calm their insecurity. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself that the mind should stand firm like a cliff, while waves break and fall away. Not because the cliff is aggressive, but because it does not move. Silence works the same way. When you stay quiet, you are not retreating. You are refusing to hand your emotions to whoever provoked you, and then refusal is strength. The world conditions us to respond instantly. A message arrives, we must reply. An insult appears, we must defend. A misunderstanding arises, we must correct it. We are taught that speed equals confidence, but Stoicism teaches the opposite. Speed is often the sign of slavery. The faster you react, the less control you have. The more urgent your response feels, the more power someone else holds over you. Silence breaks that chain. Not because silence wins arguments, but because it ends the game entirely. You do not owe every voice an answer. You do not owe every opinion your attention. You do not owe every provocation a reaction. Epictetus warned that if you allow external events to control your emotional state, you surrender your freedom without resistance, and nothing reveals that surrender more clearly than uncontrolled speech. When you speak in anger, your words become weapons turned inward. When you speak in fear, your voice betrays your weakness. When you speak to impress, you expose your dependence on approval. But when you choose silence deliberately, you reclaim yourself. Silence is not passivity, it is command. It is the moment you say, without saying anything at all, I decide when my energy is spent. Most people talk because they are bleeding internally. They speak to release tension, to seek validation, to prove worth. The Stoic speaks only when speech serves virtue, and until that moment arrives, he waits. This is why silence feels heavy to others, because they sense something they cannot name. They sense that you are not reacting on instinct. Not pulled by emotion, not desperate to be understood. You are centered, and people do not know how to handle someone who cannot be emotionally moved. Notice how arguments lose momentum when one side refuses to escalate. Notice how insults lose power when they echo unanswered. Notice how insecurity grows louder when it is not met with reassurance. Silence exposes intention. It reveals who speaks from reason and who speaks from need. That is why silence often unsettles people more than confrontation. They cannot read you. They cannot predict you. They cannot control you, and uncertainty is uncomfortable for those who seek dominance through emotion. Marcus wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Much of that suffering is created by words we never needed to say, explanations given too early, defenses offered too quickly, confessions made under pressure. silence would have protected you. Think of how many conflicts in your life were fueled not by events, but by reactions. A single sentence spoken too soon, a reply sent too quickly, a truth delivered without patience. Words, once released, cannot be recalled, but silence preserves optionality. It allows the moment to breathe, and often, when you give a moment space, it resolves itself. Not every fire requires water. Some burn out when ignored. The Stoic understands this. He understands that restraint is not suppression, it is selection. He chooses what deserves his voice, and more importantly, what does not. Power is not found in dominating conversation. Power is found in mastering impulse. The person who can pause even briefly has already stepped above the chaos. Because while others react automatically, he acts intentionally. Silence is the pause between stimulus and response, and in that pause lies freedom. This is why silence is feared, because it cannot be manipulated. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be forced. You cannot argue with silence. You cannot provoke it into weakness. You cannot twist it into contradiction. Silence simply stands unbothered. Not cold, not arrogant. Just sovereign. In a world addicted to noise, the quiet mind appears powerful by contrast alone, and that power is not performative. It does not announce itself. It is felt. People sense it before they understand it. The calm presence, the unhurried gaze, the refusal to scramble for position. Silence becomes a boundary, invisible, yet firm, and boundaries protect peace. This is why Stoicism does not teach you to withdraw from life, but to engage with discipline, to speak with purpose, to act with intention, to remain silent when silence preserves your integrity. Not everything deserves a response. Not every battle is yours. Not every misunderstanding must be corrected. Some truths arrive only when you stop explaining yourself. In the next part, we will explore why humans fear silence so deeply and how that fear reveals the fragile machinery of the ego. For now, remain here. Notice the stillness. Notice how nothing collapses when you do not rush to fill the space. This is where strength begins. Why silence makes people uncomfortable. Silence unsettles people not because it is empty, but because it removes their distractions. When words disappear, what remains is the self, and most people are not at peace with what they find there. Noise is a shelter. Conversation becomes a hiding place. Opinions become armor. Reactions become escape routes. When someone fills every moment with speech, they are often not communicating. They are fleeing from doubt, from uncertainty, from the quiet awareness that something inside them is unresolved. Silence forces confrontation, not with others, but with one's own thoughts. This is why people speak when they are nervous, why they interrupt when they feel inferior, why they argue when they feel threatened. They are not defending ideas, they are defending identity. The ego depends on constant confirmation. It wants to be seen, named, acknowledged, and silence offers none of that. When you remain quiet, you deny the ego its nourishment. No validation, no resistance, no mirror, only stillness. And stillness feels dangerous to a mind that does not know itself. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that disturbance does not come from events, but from the judgments we attach to them. Silence removes those judgments from circulation. It interrupts the loop. Without words to reinforce emotion, Emotion begins to weaken. Anger fades when it is not rehearsed. Anxiety softens when it is not verbalized. Pride collapses when it is not displayed. This is why silence is so powerful internally and so threatening externally. When someone attempts to provoke you, they are not seeking truth. They are seeking movement, a reaction, a spark. Silence denies them that reward. And without reward, behavior changes. Not because you controlled them, but because you refuse to participate. Many conflicts survive only because both sides keep feeding them with words. Remove the fuel, and the fire loses its intelligence. The Stoics understood this long before psychology gave it a name. They observed that emotion grows through expression. Not healthy expression, but impulsive expression. Speech spoken without reason strengthens the emotion that produced it. To speak angrily is to deepen anger. To complain repeatedly is to train the mind toward dissatisfaction. To explain oneself compulsively is to reinforce insecurity. Silence interrupts reinforcement. It does not deny emotion. It simply refuses to let emotion rule. This distinction is crucial. Stoicism is not repression. It is governance. The Stoic does not silence himself out of fear. He does so out of command. He understands that every word carries energy, and energy is finite. To speak is to spend. To remain silent is to conserve. Most people spend their energy on things that return nothing, arguments that change no minds, explanations that earn no respect, defenses that convince no one, and then they wonder why they feel exhausted. Silence is economy. It is choosing not to go bankrupt emotionally. This is why silence often increases presence. When you speak less, your words gain weight. When you react less, your actions gain meaning. When you explain less, your character becomes the explanation. People begin to listen not because you demand attention, but because you do not beg for it. There is a quiet authority that emerges when a person is not trying to be heard. Not aloofness, not indifference, but steadiness. Others feel it instinctively. The nervous system recognizes stability. Chaos seeks calm even while pretending to reject it. This is why some people talk more around you when you are silent. They feel exposed. Your quiet becomes a spotlight they did not ask for, and so they fill the space with words, hoping to reclaim control. But control cannot be seized through noise. It only reveals insecurity. The person who must dominate conversation usually lacks dominance internally. The person who must explain themselves constantly usually doubts their own position. The person who cannot sit in silence is often at war with themselves. Marcus warned against being carried away by the behavior of others. He wrote that it is enough to mind one's own ruling faculty. Silence protects that faculty. It creates a buffer between stimulus and judgment, and within that buffer lies freedom. Freedom not to react. Freedom not to justify. Freedom not to be pulled into emotional labor that does not serve virtue. Modern life erodes this buffer relentlessly. Notifications demand immediate response. Social platforms reward instant opinion. Outrage is measured in seconds. The slower you are, the more you appear invisible, but invisibility is not weakness. It is insulation. The Stoic does not fear being overlooked. He fears losing sovereignty over his mind, and silence preserves sovereignty. It keeps the inner citadel intact. When you speak too quickly, you invite intrusion. When you speak too often, you invite judgment. When you speak unnecessarily, you surrender leverage. Silence restores leverage, not over others, but over yourself. This is why those who master silence appear composed under pressure. They do not rush to reduce discomfort. They allow discomfort to pass. They trust that clarity arrives after agitation, not during it. Most mistakes are made in moments of urgency. Silence slows time. It creates distance between impulse and action, and distance allows wisdom to breathe. This is why seasoned leaders speak less in crisis, why experienced minds pause before responding, why maturity often sounds like quiet. Not because there is nothing to say, but because they know when not to say it. In the next part, we will explore how silence functions not only as self-control, but as emotional authority, how restraint changes the dynamic of power, how those who speak less often shape the direction of others without force. For now, remain with this thought. Silence is not absence. It is presence unexpressed, and presence, when stable, needs no announcement. Silence and inner power. Power is often misunderstood because it is confused with influence. Influence seeks to move others. Power seeks to govern the self. The Stoics cared little for dominance over people. They cared deeply about dominion over impulse. Marcus Aurelius never described strength as the ability to command others. He described it as the ability to remain aligned with reason, regardless of circumstance. Silence is one of the clearest expressions of that alignment, because silence is chosen. It is not the absence of speech. It is the refusal to surrender judgment prematurely. When you speak too quickly, you expose your inner state. Your tone reveals agitation. Your words reveal attachment. Your urgency reveals dependence. Silence conceals none of these. It transcends them. To remain quiet while emotion rises requires inner structure. It requires a mind trained not to obey the first impulse. This training does not happen accidentally. It is built through repeated moments of restraint. Each time you do not react, you strengthen the ruling faculty. Each time you pause, you reinforce command. This is why silence compounds. One moment of restraint prepares the next. Eventually, calm becomes default, not because emotion disappears, but because it no longer dictates action. The Stoics believed that the only true possession is the faculty of choice. Everything else, reputation, praise, insult, status, lies outside our control. Speech often attempts to control what cannot be controlled. We speak to manage perception, to correct misunderstanding, to influence opinion, but opinion belongs to others, and what belongs to others should not govern our peace. Silence acknowledges this boundary. It says, I will not trade my composure for your agreement. This is inner power, not withdrawal, not indifference, but independence. When your emotional state no longer rises and falls with external voices, you become difficult to disturb, and what is difficult to disturb appears powerful, not intimidating but grounded. The person who cannot be rushed cannot be dominated. The person who does not need to explain cannot be cornered. The person who is not reactive cannot be manipulated. Silence makes all three possible. This is why silence shifts dynamics without confrontation. You do not need to assert authority. You embody it. When someone insults you and you remain calm, the insult loses direction. It was meant to provoke, but meets stillness instead. And stillness has no friction. Energy dissipates. The aggressor feels foolish, not because you humiliated them, but because you refused to play the role they assigned you. This is psychological leverage, not gained through strategy, but through self-command. Marcus wrote that the best revenge is not to become like the one who harmed you. Silence makes that possible because to argue with bitterness is to adopt its rhythm. To retaliate with anger is to surrender your moral altitude. Silence keeps you above the exchange, not superior but untouched. This distinction matters. Stoicism is not about winning. It is about remaining whole. Power that costs integrity is not power. It is debt. Silence protects against that debt. It preserves alignment between action and principle, and alignment creates confidence that does not need expression. This is why some people feel uneasy around those who speak little. They cannot read their intentions. They cannot provoke reaction. They cannot measure themselves through comparison. Silence removes the social mirrors people rely on to regulate their identity, and when mirrors disappear, insecurity surfaces. This discomfort is often mistaken for intimidation, but it is not fear of you. It is fear of themselves. Your silence merely removes their distraction. This is not something to exploit. The Stoic does not use silence as a weapon. He uses it as a boundary, a line beyond which chaos does not enter. Silence does not mean avoidance. It means selectivity. There are moments when speech is necessary, when injustice must be named, when truth must be spoken, when duty requires voice, but Stoicism insists that speech must be deliberate, not reflexive, not emotional, not self-protective. Words spoken from reason carry gravity. Words spoken from impulse evaporate. This is why silence precedes wisdom. Before you speak, you must listen, not only to others but to your own internal climate. Is this response arising from clarity or from discomfort? From principle or from pride? From purpose or from fear? Silence gives you time to answer honestly, and honesty is the root of power. A person who understands themselves is not easily shaken. They do not need to perform certainty. They do not need to assert dominance. They are content to let time reveal truth. Time is an ally of the composed. Those who rush reveal fragility. Those who wait reveal strength. Silence aligns you with time. It slows the moment long enough for perspective to enter. This is why Stoic training emphasizes daily reflection, not to think more but to react less, to reduce unnecessary speech, to observe internal movement before external expression. The quieter the mind, the firmer its foundation, and from firm foundations, action becomes precise. Silence is not hesitation, it is calibration. It prepares action that is clean, proportionate, and just. The sword that swings wildly breaks. The blade that waits strikes true. In the next part, we will explore how silence operates in conflict and provocation, why responding less often ends battles more effectively than escalation ever could. For now, reflect on this. If you can remain silent when your ego demands speech, you have already won the most important struggle, the one within. Silence in conflict and provocation. Conflict rarely begins with truth. It begins with emotion, a wounded ego, a perceived slight, a moment of insecurity seeking relief. Most arguments are not attempts to understand, they are attempts to discharge tension, and tension looks for reaction. Provocation is never about you. It is about the discomfort inside the other person. They speak sharply, not because you are wrong, but because they are unsettled. They raise their voice not to clarify, but to regain a sense of control. Silence denies that control. When you respond immediately, you enter their emotional frame. You accept their tempo. You adopt their urgency. You allow their instability to dictate your movement. Silence refuses the transfer. It keeps your internal rhythm intact. Marcus reminded himself that whenever someone offends us, we should pause and consider what view of good and evil led them to act as they did. This pause is silence in practice, not silence as avoidance, but silence as investigation. You step back internally and ask, what is driving this behavior? Rarely is the answer reason. It is fear. It is frustration. It is unmet expectation. Understanding this changes everything. You stop taking provocation personally because personal offense requires intent, and most people are not acting with intent. They are reacting to their own inner storms. Silence gives you enough distance to see this clearly, and clarity dissolves anger. When you recognize that someone is speaking from pain, not truth, you stop feeling compelled to answer. Why argue with turbulence? Why reason with emotion? Why wrestle a shadow? Most conflicts escalate because both sides mistake emotional noise for substance. They respond to tone rather than meaning. Silence cuts through that confusion. It refuses to treat noise as argument. This is why silence often de-escalates tension faster than explanation. Explanation invites rebuttal. Rebuttal invites escalation. Silence invites reflection, not immediately but inevitably. When someone attacks and meets no resistance, something strange happens. The aggression has nowhere to land. The nervous system expects friction. Without it, the emotion loses structure. The anger begins to feel excessive, even to the person expressing it, and often without you saying a word. They soften, not because you dominated them, but because you did not validate the conflict. This is not manipulation. It is maturity. You are not refusing communication. You are refusing chaos. There is a difference. Stoicism does not teach you to tolerate abuse. Silence is not submission. If harm is present, action is required, but most modern conflicts are not harm. They are friction, ego brushing against ego, expectation colliding with reality. These do not require defense. They require containment. Silence contains. It prevents small sparks from becoming fires. It gives emotion time to cool before it hardens into resentment. Many relationships are damaged not by what happened, but by what was said in reaction. Words spoken in heat carve memory deeply. Silence protects memory. It allows you to respond later when wisdom has returned. There is strength in saying nothing now so that something meaningful can be said later. This is why experienced individuals rarely respond immediately in conflict. They wait, they observe, they allow the moment to pass. Not because they lack courage, but because they value precision. Precision requires calm, and calm requires silence. When you remain silent under provocation, you reclaim the upper ground, not morally superior but strategically free. You are no longer trapped inside the other person's emotional narrative. You are free to choose your response, or whether a response is necessary at all. Often, it is not. Time resolves more conflicts than argument ever could. Time exposes exaggeration. Time reveals intention. Time softens distortion. Silence aligns you with time. This is why restraint feels powerful, because it trusts reality to do its work. Not every accusation survives daylight. Not every misunderstanding endures patience. Not every insult deserves permanence. Silence allows truth to separate itself from noise. Marcus often reminded himself that people act according to what seems right to them. Understanding this prevents hatred. Silence creates the space where understanding can enter. When you speak immediately, you close that space. You lock yourself into a position. You defend an identity, and once identity is involved, reason struggles to breathe. Silence delays identity. It keeps you fluid. It allows learning. It preserves humility, and humility is not weakness, it is accuracy. You do not yet know everything, therefore you wait. This waiting is not passive. It is attentive. It watches patterns. It notices repetition. It gathers information. Only then does speech, if needed, emerge grounded and clean. Speech born from silence carries weight. Speech born from emotion evaporates. This is why silence is most powerful when insulted unjustly. Your instinct is to correct, to clarify, to protect reputation, but reputation lives in the minds of others, and minds cannot be commanded. Trying to manage perception through argument is exhausting. Silence accepts the limit. It says those who understand me will understand. Those who do not will not, regardless of my explanation. This acceptance is freeing. It ends the performance. It returns you to yourself, and returning to yourself is always strength. In the next part, we will explore the quieter side of silence, how it creates presence, gravity, and an almost intangible authority in social life. Not dominance, not intimidation, but depth. For now, hold this: you do not lose power by remaining silent in conflict. You lose power only when you surrender your composure. Silence preserves it. The quiet authority of silence. Authority is often mistaken for volume. Those who speak the loudest are assumed to lead. Those who dominate conversation are assumed to command, but noise does not create authority. Stability does. The Stoics understood that influence grows not from assertion but from consistency of character. Silence contributes to that consistency. It removes unnecessary movement. It reduces contradiction. It allows your actions to speak without interference. When a person speaks constantly, they dilute themselves. Each statement invites evaluation. Each opinion invites challenge. Each explanation invites doubt. But when speech is rare, it becomes deliberate, and deliberation signals depth. People instinctively trust what is measured. They sense when words have passed through reflection before emerging. Silence becomes a filter. Not everything passes through, only what matters. This restraint creates gravity. Not heaviness, but weight. The kind that makes others pause. The kind that draws attention without demanding it. You may have noticed this in certain individuals. They enter a room and do not immediately speak. They observe. They listen. They allow the environment to reveal itself. When they eventually speak, people lean in, not because the words are louder, but because silence has prepared the space. This is not charisma. It is coherence. Their inner state matches their outer behavior. No excess, no urgency, no performance. The Stoic ideal was not to impress, but to align. To live in such a way that actions and values do not conflict. Silence supports this alignment. It prevents impulsive contradiction. It keeps speech in harmony with principle. In contrast, constant talking creates fragmentation. A person says one thing today, another tomorrow. Emotion dictates expression. Inconsistency follows, and inconsistency erodes authority. Silence stabilizes identity. It gives you time to act before speaking and speaking after acting. This order matters. Those who speak first and act later often lose credibility. Those who act first and speak later earn it. Silence reverses the modern instinct. Instead of broadcasting intention, it prioritizes execution. Instead of declaring values, it embodies them, and embodiment carries more authority than declaration ever could. Marcus wrote that one should waste no time arguing what a good person should be and simply be one. Silence makes this possible because argument is replaced with presence. Presence does not convince through logic, it convinces through coherence. People sense when someone is not internally divided, when words are not chasing approval, when behavior does not seek validation. This steadiness becomes influence, not overt, not manipulative, but persuasive in the deepest sense. Silence creates space around you, not emptiness, but clarity. In that clarity, others project meaning. They listen more closely. They interpret more carefully because silence removes noise, and the mind fills silence with attention. This is why silence often amplifies respect, not because you demand it, but because you do not need it. Needing respect repels it, not needing it. It attracts it. This paradox lies at the heart of Stoic power. To care deeply about virtue and lightly about perception, silence expresses that balance. It signals that your center is not external, that your self-worth is not negotiated through conversation, that you are not seeking consensus to stabilize identity. This independence is felt, and what is felt does not need explanation. There is also a humility within silence, not the humility of self-diminishment, but of accurate self-assessment. The awareness that not every thought deserves expression, that not every insight is timely, that wisdom often arrives not through speaking, but through listening. Listening requires silence, and listening deepens understanding. The more you listen, the less you assume. The less you assume, the more precisely you act. Precision builds trust. Trust builds authority. And authority born this way does not fade because it is not built on dominance. It is built on reliability. People trust those who do not react unpredictably, who do not escalate emotionally, who do not speak carelessly. Silence makes you predictable in the best way, calm, measured, grounded. This predictability is safety, and humans gravitate towards safety, especially in chaotic environments. This is why silence becomes magnetic. Not dramatic, not mysterious, but calming. Others feel regulated around you. Their own nervous systems begin to slow. This is leadership in its most elemental form. Not command, regulation. You stabilize yourself and others stabilize in your presence. No instruction required. No persuasion needed, just steadiness. Silence reinforces this steadiness. It prevents emotional contagion. It keeps you from absorbing the agitation of the room, and when you remain unmoved, you become an anchor. Anchors do not speak. They hold. This quiet authority is not visible in metrics. It cannot be measured, but it is unmistakable. People seek your opinion. They wait for your response. They notice when you speak because you have trained them unintentionally to to associate your voice with meaning. Meaning arises when words are rare and sincere, not abundant and reactive. In the next part, we will turn inward again and examine how silence reshapes your relationship with yourself, how inner dialogue softens, how anxiety loosens its grip, how stillness becomes a companion rather than a threat. For now, remember this: you do not need to announce strength. Strength announces itself through restraint, and restraint often sounds like silence. Silence and the inner world. Most people believe silence affects only how they appear to others. They do not realize its deeper function. Silence reshapes the internal world first, before it influences relationships, reputation, or authority. It alters the dialogue within. The mind is rarely quiet by itself, left untrained. It speaks endlessly. It replays conversations, rehearses future conflicts, rewrites past mistakes. Noise outside fuels noise inside, and the more one speaks impulsively, the louder the inner world becomes. Speech trains thought. Every time you verbalize worry, you strengthen it. Every time you complain aloud, you rehearse dissatisfaction. Every time you justify yourself, you reinforce doubt. Silence interrupts this cycle, not by force but by absence. When words stop, the mind loses momentum. Thoughts slow. Emotion weakens. Not immediately but inevitably. The Stoics understood that peace does not come from adding ideas, but from removing disturbance. Silence removes disturbance at its source. It prevents the mind from spiraling through expression. It allows thoughts to pass without being crystallized into language, and what is not named often dissolves. Language gives shape to emotion. Without language, emotion remains fluid, and fluid emotions are easier to release. This is why silence feels uncomfortable at first. The mind resists losing its familiar patterns. It seeks stimulation. It wants something to grasp, but if you remain still long enough, something changes. The noise softens. The urgency fades. A quieter awareness emerges. Not empty, observant. This is the beginning of inner order. Marcus wrote repeatedly about the importance of returning inward. Not escaping the world, but recentering the mind. Silence is the doorway inward. Without it, the inner world remains crowded. Crowded with opinions, crowded with imagined judgments, crowded with unnecessary battles. Silence clears space. In that space, reason can breathe. The Stoics called this the ruling faculty, the part of the mind capable of choice. When the ruling faculty is drowned in noise, it cannot rule. Silence restores its authority. It places thought back under governance. You begin to notice the gap between impulse and decision, and in that gap, peace becomes possible. Anxiety thrives on constant narration. What if? They think, I should have said. Silence starves anxiety, not by arguing with it, but by refusing to narrate it. Without narration, anxiety loses continuity. It cannot sustain itself. This is why moments of true calm often occur when the mind stops commenting. No interpretation, no rehearsal, just presence. Silence cultivates presence. It brings attention back to the body, to breath, to posture, to the moment as it is, not as imagined. The Stoics practiced this instinctively. They did not meditate to escape reality. They reflected to meet it clearly. Silence allowed them to observe their internal reactions without identifying with them. This separation is freedom. You are not the thought. You are not the urge. You are the one who notices them. Silence strengthens this vantage point. The less you speak impulsively, the less you identify with transient emotion. The less you identify, the more stable you become. Stability breeds calm. Calm allows discernment. Discernment guides action. This chain begins with silence. Without silence, everything collapses into reaction. Modern life rarely permits this. Constant sound, constant commentary, constant stimulation. Even solitude is filled with devices. The mind is never allowed to settle, and so unrest becomes chronic. The Stoic does not flee the world, but he learns to create inner quiet within it. Silence becomes portable. It travels with him. He can be in a crowd and remain inwardly still because silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of unnecessary response. This is mastery, not over environment, but over attention. Attention determines experience. Where attention goes, emotion follows. Silence teaches attention discipline. It teaches you not to chase every stimulus, not to follow every thought, not to react to every feeling. Gradually, the mind becomes less cluttered. Decisions become simpler, values clearer. You no longer feel compelled to explain your inner state. You simply observe it. This observation weakens attachment, and attachment is the root of suffering. We suffer not because events occur, but because we cling to interpretation. Silence loosens that grip. It allows events to pass through without entanglement. You still feel, but feeling no longer commands. This is not numbness. It is balance. The Stoics never sought emotional absence. They sought emotional proportion. Silence restores proportion. It prevents minor discomfort from becoming major distress. It reminds the mind that not everything requires reaction. Some things require patience, others require endurance, and many require nothing at all. The quiet mind learns to discriminate. This discrimination is wisdom. It does not come from reading, it does not come from advice. It comes from lived restraint, from moments when you could have spoken but chose not to. Each such moment strengthens inner sovereignty. In time, silence no longer feels like effort, it feels natural. You begin to trust it. You realize that clarity often arrives after you stop speaking, that answers surface when questions are allowed to rest. That peace is not constructed, it is uncovered. Next, we will examine when silence must end, because Stoicism does not teach permanent quiet. It teaches purposeful speech, and knowing when to speak is as important as knowing when not to. For now, sit with this. Silence does not empty the mind. It reveals what matters within it. When silence must end. Silence is powerful, but it is not absolute. The Stoic does not worship quiet. He uses it. There are moments when silence becomes avoidance, when restraint turns into withdrawal, when peace becomes comfort disguised as wisdom. Stoicism does not permit this confusion. The discipline is not to be silent always, but to speak only when speech serves virtue. Knowing when silence must end requires discernment, and discernment comes from principle, not emotion. The Stoics did not retreat from duty. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire. He spoke when justice required voice. He acted when responsibility demanded decision. Silence prepared him for speech. It did not replace it. Speech that emerges from silence is different. It is measured. It is clean. It is free from excess. It does not seek to impress. It seeks to align. The Stoic speaks when truth must be defended. Not ego, not reputation, not comfort, but truth. If injustice persists because you remain silent, silence becomes negligence. If harm spreads because you choose peace over courage, restraint becomes fear. Stoicism does not excuse cowardice. It refines courage. The difference lies in intention. Are you silent because you fear conflict or because conflict is unnecessary? Are you quiet because you lack conviction or because conviction does not require display? These questions reveal the line. Silence guided by fear weakens. Silence guided by reason strengthens. This is why the Stoics emphasized duty. Each person has roles. As a parent, as a leader, as a citizen, as a human being. Within each role, certain speech is required. To remain silent when guidance is needed is not wisdom. To withhold truth when it protects others is not restraint. Silence must never violate justice, but justice rarely requires loudness. It requires clarity. When the Stoic speaks, he does so without anger, without insult, without theatrical emotion. He states what is necessary and nothing more. No performance, no escalation, no resentment. Speech becomes extension of reason, not emotion. This is what distinguishes Stoic speech from reaction. Reaction seeks release. Stoic speech seeks resolution. Silence prepares the ground. It strips emotion from the voice. It ensures that when words arrive, they arrive clean. This is why silence precedes courage. Without silence, courage often becomes aggression. Without silence, honesty becomes cruelty. Without silence, conviction becomes rigidity. Quiet reflection tempers expression. It ensures proportion. The Stoic does not raise his voice to be heard. He trusts that truth spoken calmly carries its own authority, even if it is rejected. Especially if it is rejected because acceptance is not the measure of truth. Alignment is. Silence gives you the patience to accept that not all truths will be welcomed, and that is fine. Your task is not to persuade all minds. Your task is to remain faithful to reason. Sometimes this means speaking into resistance. Other times it means stepping back and allowing consequences to teach. Silence must also end when boundaries are crossed. Boundaries do not require explanation. They require clarity. A single calm sentence, spoken without apology, is often enough. No justification, no elaboration, no emotional charge. Silence before clarity during silence after. This rhythm is powerful. It communicates strength without hostility. It shows that you are not seeking dominance. Only respect, and respect arises when boundaries are consistent, not loud. Consistent. The Stoic speaks to protect integrity, not image. Image belongs to others. Integrity belongs to you. When speech preserves integrity, it is necessary. When speech seeks validation, it is waste. Silence helps you tell the difference. It allows the impulse to pass so intention can appear. Often, when you wait, the urge to speak dissolves and you realize nothing needed to be said at all, but when the urge remains after calm returns, that is reason calling. Then you speak, not urgently, not emotionally, but firmly. This firmness is not aggression, it is certainty. Certainty does not shout, it stands. This is why Stoic speech often feels final, not dramatic but resolved. There is no lingering argument, no looping explanation. The words land, and the speaker returns to silence. No attachment to outcome, no desire to be praised, no fear of rejection. Silence resumes because the duty has been fulfilled. This detachment is crucial. If you speak and then obsess over reaction, you have not spoken freely. You have only changed the form of dependence. Silence after speech protects freedom. It releases the outcome. It accepts whatever follows. A more fati love of fate is practiced here. You say what must be said, then you accept what comes. This acceptance requires strength. Silence strengthens that strength. In the final part, we will bring everything together. We will return to the core truth that silence is not the absence of power, but its expression, and we will close with a quiet reminder. One that does not instruct, but invites. Remain here. Let the words settle. We are near the end. There comes a point in life when you realize that not every moment asks for your voice. Some moments ask for your presence. Some ask for patience. Some ask for endurance. And some ask only that you remain still long enough to understand what is happening within you. Silence is not a technique. It is a posture toward life. It is the decision to meet the world without flinching, to remain upright when misunderstood, to stay composed when emotions rise, to trust that not everything requires immediate correction. The Stoics did not seek quiet lives. They lived in war, in politics, in loss, in uncertainty. Yet they cultivated an inner stillness that noise could not reach, not by withdrawing, but by choosing carefully where their energy would go. Silence was their gatekeeper. It decided what entered the mind and what remained outside. In a world that demands reaction, silence becomes resistance, not rebellion, not refusal, but restraint. And restraint is the highest form of freedom. When you stop reacting, you begin choosing. When you begin choosing, you reclaim authorship of your life. No longer pushed by opinion, no longer pulled by insult, no longer hurried by urgency that is not yours. You return to yourself. This return is subtle. No one applauds it. No one notices it at first, but slowly. Life begins to feel lighter, not because circumstances improve, but because fewer things disturb you. You discover that peace is not found by controlling the world. It is found by governing the response. This was the lesson Marcus repeated to himself night after night, not to escape pain, but to meet it without surrender. Silence was not his retreat, it was his armor. Not cold, not distant, simply firm. When you choose silence, you are not disappearing. You are becoming deliberate. You are saying, I will not give my attention to what does not deserve it. This decision, repeated daily, reshapes the soul. Gradually, your words become fewer, but truer. Your reactions slower, but wiser. Your presence calmer but stronger. People may not understand this change. Some will mistake it for distance, others for indifference. Let them. Understanding is not required for alignment. You are not here to be interpreted. You are here to live well, and living well often looks quiet. There will be moments when silence feels lonely, when speaking would be easier, when explaining yourself would bring temporary relief. In those moments, remember this: relief is not peace. Peace lasts longer. Silence protects peace. It preserves dignity when emotions tempt you to abandon it. It keeps you upright when pride demands display. It reminds you that your worth is not negotiated in conversation. You already possess it. Nothing spoken can add to it. Nothing unsaid can take it away. The Stoics believed that the highest good was harmony with nature with reason. Silence aligns you with that harmony. It allows life to unfold without constant interference. It teaches patience, and patience teaches trust. Not blind trust, but trust in your capacity to endure, to remain, to hold steady. This steadiness becomes your signature. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. Those who meet you will feel it. They may not know why. They may not name it, but they will sense something rare. A person who does not rush. A mind that does not scatter. A soul that stands. And in a restless world, this is power. Not power over others, power over oneself. This is the only power that cannot be taken. Not by insult, not by loss, not by change, because it does not depend on circumstance. It depends on choice, and each time you choose silence over reaction, you choose freedom over impulse. This choice will not make your life easier. It will make it clearer, and clarity is enough. So when the world grows loud, return here. When opinions press in, step back. When emotion surges, pause. Let silence stand between you and chaos. Not as a wall, but as a space where reason can enter. A space where dignity remains intact. A space where you remember who you are. You do not need to speak to prove strength. You do not need to react to exist. You do not need to explain yourself to be whole. Remain calm. Remain steady, and when you do speak, let it be because it matters. Until then, let silence do the work. Goodbye and see you in the next videos.